James Carter's hands gripped the control panel as warning lights flashed red across every screen. The ship shuddered violently, throwing him against his restraints. Something had gone terribly wrong with the wormhole jump. The navigation system was dead. The stabilizers weren't responding. Through the viewport, he could see stars spinning in impossible directions. Come on, he muttered, frantically trying to regain control. But the ship had other ideas. It tumbled through space like a leaf caught in a storm. Then he saw it. A planet. Ice covered its entire surface, glowing pale blue against the darkness of space. And he was falling straight toward it. James barely had time to brace himself before impact. The ship hit the frozen ground at tremendous speed. Metal screamed and tore. Equipment ripped free from the walls. James felt his body slam against the restraints so hard he couldn't breathe. The ship carved a long trench through the ice, spinning and bouncing, before finally crashing into something solid. Everything went silent except for the ringing in James's ears. He hung upside down in his seat, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. Every part of his body hurt. His right arm felt like it was on fire. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. James released his harness and dropped onto what used to be the ceiling. He lay there for a moment, just breathing, trying to make his thoughts work properly. Then survival instinct kicked in. He needed to get out. The ship could explode. There could be fuel leaks. He had to move. The emergency hatch refused to open at first, but James kicked it until something broke and it swung outward. He crawled through and immediately regretted it. The cold hit him like a physical blow. Even through his thermal suit, he felt the deadly chill trying to seep into his bones. His breath turned to ice crystals instantly. The air itself felt sharp, like breathing knives. James stood slowly, looking around at his new prison. Ice stretched in every direction, endless and hostile. Strange trees made entirely of crystal rose toward a gray sky. Everything was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This world wanted him dead. He limped back to the wreckage and forced himself to think clearly. First, assess the damage. The reactor was cracked but still generating some power. The communication system was scattered across 1/2 kilometer of ice. His emergency beacon was crushed flat. The nearest human colony was so far away it might as well be in another universe. Nobody was coming to save him. He was completely alone. James spent the next few hours salvaging what he could from the ship. Food rations for maybe 3 weeks. A water recycler that was damaged but might work. Medical supplies. Tools. And most importantly, the fire-starting kit with chemical accelerants. As the gray sky darkened toward black, the temperature dropped even further. James found a spot between 3 large crystal trees that blocked some of the wind. He cleared the frozen ground and built a small shelter using pieces of the ship. Then he gathered what passed for wood on this planet, dead organic matter that had frozen solid long ago. James knew lighting a fire on an ice world was dangerous. The heat could crack the ice beneath him. The light might attract predators. But without fire, he would be dead before morning. The choice was simple. He arranged the fuel carefully, added the chemical accelerant, and activated the ignition stick. Flames burst to life, orange and warm and beautiful. James almost cried with relief as heat washed over him. He fed more fuel into the fire, making it bigger than necessary, just because he could. The flames danced and crackled. For the first time since the crash, James felt like he might actually survive this. He ate a protein bar and took stock of his situation. 3 weeks of food. No way to call for help. A ship that would take months to repair even if he had the right parts. Temperatures that could kill in minutes. And absolutely no idea what kind of creatures lived on this frozen world. Well, Carter, he said to himself, you wanted adventure. Congratulations. The fire popped and sparked. Somewhere in the distance, something made a sound like wind howling through empty caves. James added more fuel and pulled his thermal blanket tighter around his shoulders. He didn't know that his fire was the first flame this planet had seen in 3,000 years. He didn't know that the heat signature was visible for hundreds of kilometers, cutting through the planet's magnetic interference like a beacon. He didn't know that something desperate and dying had seen that light and was crawling toward it with the last of its strength. James sat by his fire, alone on a frozen world, and tried not to think about how many things could go wrong. The cold. Starvation. Equipment failure. Whatever made that howling sound in the distance. Any of them could kill him. But humans hadn't reached the stars by giving up when things got difficult. James had survival training. He had tools. He had his mind. And most importantly, he had fire. As long as he had fire, he had hope. The night deepened around him. The crystal trees reflected the firelight in strange patterns. Ice crackled and groaned as the temperature continued to drop. James fed more fuel to the flames and settled in to wait for morning. He had no idea that morning would bring something impossible. Something that would change not just his fate, but the fate of 2 entire species. All because he had done something simple. He had lit a fire in the darkness. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. James woke to a sound that made his heart race. Something was scraping against ice, getting closer. His hand shot out and grabbed the plasma cutter he'd placed beside his sleeping bag. The fire had burned down to glowing embers during the night. Gray dawn light filtered through the crystal trees, making everything look ghostly. The scraping came again. Closer now. And with it came a sound that made James's chest tighten, a soft, desperate whimpering like something in terrible pain. He sat up slowly, weapon ready, eyes scanning the area around his camp. At first he saw nothing but ice and shadows. Then movement caught his attention. Something was dragging itself toward the dying fire. James held his breath. The creature was small, maybe the size of a house cat. It had scales that shimmered dark blue, with faint patterns of light flickering across its body like dying stars. 4 legs, a long tail, and wings, one of which was torn badly, hanging in shreds. Frost covered every part of it. The creature moved so slowly, so painfully, that James could tell it was near death. "What are you?" James whispered. The creature collapsed just short of the fire pit. Its chest heaved with effort. Those light patterns on its scales were fading, going dark one by one. Then it lifted its head and looked directly at James. Its eyes were large and gold and filled with intelligence. And desperation. It wasn't just an animal. This was something more. Something that knew it was dying and had come to the only warmth it could find. James's training screamed at him to be careful. Unknown aliens could be poisonous. They could carry diseases. They could be dangerous even when they looked harmless. But looking at this small, freezing creature, James couldn't just watch it die. "Okay," he said softly, setting down his weapon. "Okay, I'll help." He quickly built up the fire again, adding fuel until flames leaped high and bright. The creature's eyes followed every movement. It tried to crawl closer to the heat but couldn't manage even that. James grabbed one of his thermal blankets. He only had 3, and they were precious survival gear. But he didn't hesitate. He approached slowly, showing his empty hands. "Easy now," he murmured. "I'm trying to help." The creature didn't fight or run. If anything, it seemed to relax slightly. James carefully wrapped it in the blanket, surprised by how light it was. The scales felt cold as death even through his gloves. He lifted the creature gently and brought it close to the fire. The change was immediate. The creature's eyes brightened. Those light patterns across its scales started glowing again, pulsing with soft blue light. It made a sound, half purr, half musical note, and James felt the vibration through his hands. "You're welcome," James said, settling cross-legged by the fire with the bundled creature in his lap. He examined the torn wing carefully. The damage was bad but not hopeless. Using his medical kit, James cleaned the wound and applied synthetic skin, a substance that helped human injuries heal. He had no idea if it would work on alien biology, but it was better than nothing. The creature watched him work without flinching. Those golden eyes never left his face. It seemed to understand he was helping. "You need food too," James said, looking at his small pile of rations. He had protein paste, high-calorie stuff designed to keep humans alive in harsh conditions. Would an alien creature be able to eat it? He squeezed some onto his finger and offered it carefully. The creature sniffed, then licked it off his finger. Its eyes went wide and it chirped excitedly, like a happy bird. James couldn't help but laugh. "Guess that works for you." He fed the creature half a ration pack. It was more than he should spare, but the thing was clearly starving. As it ate, warmth gradually returned to its body. The frost melted away, revealing scales that gleamed like polished sapphire. Beautiful. When it finished eating, the creature crawled onto James's lap and curled into a tight ball against his chest. James felt real warmth radiating from it now, like it had some kind of furnace inside that was finally rekindling. "You're going to be okay," James said, gently touching the creature's head. The scales felt smooth and warm now, almost like sun-heated metal. "We're both going to be okay." The creature looked up at him with those intelligent gold eyes. In them, James saw something remarkable. Gratitude. Trust. Connection. "You need a name," James thought out loud. "Can't just keep calling you creature." "How about Ember?" Because you came to my fire, and now you're glowing warm again. Ember. Yeah, that fits. Ember chirped softly and pressed closer against James's chest. The dragon, because James was now certain this was some kind of dragon, seemed to understand. Or at least, it seemed content. James sat there holding an alien creature that should probably terrify him. He was stranded on a frozen planet with no rescue coming. His supplies were running out. He'd just given precious food and gear to something he knew nothing about. Every logical part of his brain said this was stupid. But looking down at Ember, feeling the small dragon's warmth, hearing its contented breathing, James didn't feel alone anymore. And on this frozen world, that meant everything. Just you and me now, James said quietly. We'll figure this out together. Ember chirped in agreement and finally closed its eyes, safe and warm for the first time since crawling from whatever nest had failed to protect it. James kept the fire burning bright and held the sleeping dragon close. He had no idea what would come next. He didn't know that Ember would save his life many times over. He didn't know that this moment, a human showing kindness to a dying creature, would change the fate of entire species. All he knew was that he wasn't alone anymore. And somehow, that made survival seem possible. 5 days passed and James learned that having a dragon made survival much easier. Ember healed quickly. The torn wing fixed itself under the synthetic skin treatment. Within days the young dragon was trying to fly, clumsy attempts that usually ended with Ember tumbling into snowdrifts and chirping angrily until James pulled it out. But each attempt got better. The dragon helped in other ways too. Ember could somehow sense things James couldn't. The dragon would chirp warnings before ice cracked or when the wind was about to turn dangerous. Ember led James to places where water flowed beneath the ice, warm enough to drink. Most importantly, Ember hunted small frozen creatures and brought them back. The meat was strange but edible when cooked. At night they huddled together. Ember's internal heat kept James warm. James's body heat helped the young dragon during the coldest hours. They needed each other. It felt right. On the 6th day, everything changed. James was working inside the ship's wreckage, trying to fix the damaged reactor. Maybe if he could get more power, he could jury-rig some kind of distress signal. He was deep in concentration when Ember suddenly went rigid. The dragon's scales flashed bright blue. It made a sound James had never heard before, a sharp, piercing screech that echoed through the ice forest. A warning. What is it? James grabbed his plasma cutter and scrambled out of the wreckage fast. Ember crouched low, wings spread wide, staring into the forest. Every scale on its body pulsed with rapid light. The dragon was terrified. Then James heard it. A clicking, chittering sound that made his skin crawl. It came from everywhere at once, surrounding their camp. This is very bad, James muttered, activating the plasma cutter. The tool hummed to life, its blade glowing bright blue. They emerged from between the crystal trees like nightmares come to life. Creatures that looked like giant insects, each standing taller than James. Their bodies were covered in pale armor that looked like bone. Multiple legs carried them across the ice with horrible speed. Their heads had no eyes but were covered in twitching sensor organs. Mandibles clicked together, dripping liquid that froze as it hit the ground. James's mind raced through his training. He'd heard about creatures like this. Scrael, parasitic hunters that lived on ice worlds. They thrived in extreme cold. And they were killers. There were 6 of them, maybe more hiding in the trees. They moved together with perfect coordination, surrounding the camp. All their senses focused on Ember. They want you, James realized, stepping between the dragon and the nearest creature. They're hunting you. Ember snarled, a sound far fiercer than its small body should make. Fire flickered in the back of its throat, weak flames, nothing like what an adult dragon could do. The Scrael attacked. 3 rushed forward at once, mandibles snapping. James swung the plasma cutter in a wide arc. The superheated blade cut through the first creature's armor like it was paper. Green blood sprayed. The creature shrieked and fell back. But the others kept coming. James dove sideways as mandibles snapped where his head had been a second before. He rolled, came up swinging, and sliced through another creature's legs. It collapsed, thrashing and clicking. But there were too many. Something slammed into James from behind, driving him face first into the ice. He felt mandibles close around his shoulder. Only his suit's thick padding kept them from punching through to his flesh. The pressure was crushing. Then fire exploded above him. Ember had launched itself at the creature attacking James. The young dragon clamped onto the Scrael's head and breathed fire directly into its sensor organs. The creature released James and staggered backward, trying to shake off the furious dragon. James scrambled to his feet. He grabbed an explosive charge he'd salvaged from the ship earlier. His fingers fumbled with the timer. 3 seconds. He hurled it at the cluster of Skrael in the trees. "Ember, move," he shouted. The dragon released the Skrael and dove toward James just as the explosive detonated. The blast was massive. It shattered a crystal tree, sending huge shards raining down like spears. 2 Skrael were impaled instantly. Another was crushed under falling ice. The sound was deafening. The remaining creatures retreated, clicking and chittering in what sounded like confusion or fear. They dragged their wounded back into the forest. But James could still feel them out there. Watching. Waiting. He stood breathing hard, plasma cutter still humming in his hand. His shoulder throbbed where the mandibles had gripped him. His hands shook with adrenaline and fear. Ember landed beside him, pressing against his leg. The dragon was trembling too. "It's okay," James said, though his own voice shook. "We're okay." But he knew the truth. The Skrael would come back. They'd bring more next time. Eventually, he and Ember would be overwhelmed. They couldn't win this fight through strength alone. That night James sat by the fire with Ember curled in his lap. He stared into the flames and thought hard. For 6 days he'd focused on immediate survival: food, water, warmth. But that wasn't enough anymore. They needed a real solution. Ember chirped softly. James looked down at the dragon. Those golden eyes watched him with complete trust. "We can't keep running," James said quietly. "And we can't fight them all. So we need to change the game." Ember tilted its head, listening. "You came from somewhere," James continued. "Dragons are pack animals, right? Social creatures. Where there's one baby, there should be adults. A family. A group." Ember's scales pulsed with soft light. "So tomorrow," James said, scratching behind the dragon's head, "you're going to show me where you came from. Because if there are more dragons somewhere, maybe we can all survive this together." Ember chirped agreement and settled against his chest. Outside in the darkness, the Skrael watched and waited. But inside the firelight, a human and a dragon made plans that would change everything. The journey deeper into the ice took 2 full days. Ember led the way, navigating through narrow canyons and across frozen plains where the wind howled like angry ghosts. James followed, carrying a heavy pack loaded with tools, food, and parts from his ship's reactor. Every step took him farther from his crash site. Every kilometer made going back harder. But he'd made his choice. Forward was the only direction that mattered now. The Skrael followed them. James spotted the creatures in the distance, pale shapes moving between ice formations. They never got close enough to attack, but they were always there. Patient hunters waiting for their prey to get tired and weak. "They are hurting us," James realized on the second day. "Pushing us where they want us to go." Ember chirped but didn't change direction. Whatever lay ahead was more important than the threat behind them. As they descended into a deep canyon, James noticed something strange. The temperature was rising. Just slightly, but his suit sensors registered the change. Heat was coming from below. Deep underground, something warm was burning. The ice walls here were thinner, almost see-through. Through them James could see faint orange glows far beneath the surface. "This is it," he whispered. "This is where you came from." Ember led him to a crack in the canyon wall. An opening barely wide enough for James to squeeze through. Beyond it lay tunnels that went down and down. The walls were too smooth to be natural. Too perfect. Someone had carved these passages long ago. The tunnel descended for nearly a kilometer. With each step the temperature rose. Ice gave way to bare rock. That rock radiated warmth. James's suit automatically vented heat to keep him from overheating. Then the tunnel opened into a cavern so enormous James couldn't see the far walls. "Oh my God," he breathed. The chamber was filled with massive crystal pods arranged in perfect rows. Inside each pod lay a dragon. Adult dragons, huge ones, easily 10 times Ember's size. Their scales ranged from deep red to midnight black, from silver to emerald green. There must have been 50 of them, maybe more. All sleeping. James approached the nearest pod on shaky legs. Each crystal structure was connected to a network of glowing tubes that pulsed with faint energy. A hibernation system, he realized. Powered by heat from deep underground. Technology far beyond anything humans could build, designed to keep these creatures alive through thousands of years of frozen sleep. But something was wrong. James examined the energy readings and his stomach dropped. The system was failing. The underground heat sources were running out. Power levels were dropping year by year. According to his calculations, the system would collapse completely in about 6 months. "They're dying," James said, looking at Ember. Your whole family is dying in their sleep, and they don't even know it. Ember whimpered, pressing against his leg. James paced the chamber, his mind racing. The hibernation system needed more power. His ship's reactor could provide that power, even damaged as it was. The problem was making human technology work with alien systems. And getting the reactor here. I'd have to carry the reactor core piece by piece, James muttered. Then connect human technology to alien technology that works on completely different principles. One mistake and the reactor explodes, killing everyone. It was insane. It violated every safety rule he'd ever learned. And if he succeeded, he'd be destroying his ship's power source. His only potential way off this frozen planet. James looked at the sleeping dragons, then down at Ember. The young dragon watched him with those trusting golden eyes. I'm an idiot, James said. But let's do this. The next 3 days were the hardest of James's life. He had to disassemble the reactor, carry each piece through kilometers of tunnels, then reassemble everything in the cavern. Each component was brutally heavy. His muscles screamed. His hands went numb despite thick gloves. The Skrail kept shadowing them, and twice James had to fight them off while protecting both Ember and the precious equipment. On the 4th day, the last piece was in place. James stood before the hibernation system's central hub with reactor parts spread around him and tools and shaking hands. This was the moment. He would either save an entire species or kill them all. Here goes everything, James said. He began connecting cables and rerouting power flows. It shouldn't work. Human technology and alien technology were completely different. But James had always been good at making impossible things function. That's why the Survey Corps had recruited him in the first place. He bypassed safety systems. He created adapters from scrap metal. 12 hours of continuous work, fueled by stimulant packs and pure determination. Ember stayed close the whole time, providing warmth and occasional encouraging chirps. Finally, James made the last connection and activated the system. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the reactor hummed to life. Energy poured into the alien network. The pods began glowing brighter, pulsing with renewed power. It's working, James whispered. It's actually working. The hibernation pods started their wake-up sequences. One by one, the sleeping dragons began to stir. Massive heads lifted. Eyes opened after 3,000 years of darkness. Gold eyes. Green eyes. Amber eyes. All looking around in confusion. James suddenly realized he was standing in a chamber with 50 waking dragons. Apex predators. Each one could kill him with a single bite. And he was very, very small. Ember, he said quietly, I think we should. The nearest pod shattered. A dragon the color of fresh blood emerged, scales gleaming. It was massive, 20 meters from nose to tail. Wings unfolded. The creature's eyes fixed on James and its lips curled back, revealing teeth like swords. It roared. The sound shook the entire cavern and made James's bones vibrate. He grabbed Ember and ran for his life. James made it maybe 20 steps before dragons surrounded him. They emerged from their pods roaring with fury, wings spreading, fire building in their throats. 3,000 years of sleep had left them confused and angry. Their eyes tracked James with predatory focus. Small. Weak. Prey. This was a terrible idea, James gasped, backing against a cavern wall with Ember clutched against his chest. The young dragon wriggled free and positioned itself between James and the advancing adults. Ember spread its small wings and snarled with all the fierceness its little body could manage. Protecting him. The nearest adult dragon paused. Its massive head tilted, studying Ember with confusion. Then Ember's scales began pulsing with rapid light patterns. Complex sequences that looked like language. Another dragon approached. This one was midnight black with silver markings. She was larger than the others, clearly the leader. Scars marked her scales from ancient battles. Her amber eyes studied Ember, then shifted to James with an intelligence that took his breath away. Ember chirped urgently. The light patterns on its scales grew more complex, more insistent. The young dragon was communicating something important. The scarred leader watched Ember's display. Her expression shifted from aggression to confusion to something that might have been shock. She looked at James again. This time there was no hunger in her gaze. There was question. She spoke. A deep sound that vibrated in James's chest. Not English, obviously, but there was clear meaning in it. She wanted to understand. I don't suppose any of you speak human? James tried, his voice shaking. The leader made a sound almost like laughter. She approached slowly, lowering her massive head to James's level. Then she did something extraordinary. She gently touched her nose to his forehead. James felt a presence in his mind. Not words exactly, but impressions. Emotions. Memories. She was showing him what Ember had communicated. He saw through Ember's eyes. Crawling from a dying pot, abandoned and freezing. Then warmth. Fire. A strange creature that gave food, shelter, protection. Days of safety. Battle against ancient enemies. And finally, the journey here, led by a being that had every reason to leave the dragons to die but instead gave everything to save them. The leader pulled back. James staggered, his head spinning. She communicated again. Not words, but meaning James somehow understood. Why did you save the child? Why wake us? You are prey. Prey runs from predators. Prey does not rescue them. Because Ember needed help, James said. And then you all needed help. And I could help, so I did. That's what humans do. We help. The leader rumbled, definitely laughter this time. She turned to the assembled dragons and vocalized something in their language. The other dragons relaxed. Wings folded. Fire faded. They were no longer seeing James as food. They were curious. Over the next hour, through Ember's translation and occasional mind contact with the leader, James explained everything. 3,000 years had passed. The galaxy had changed. The Dragon Empire was gone. Everyone thought dragons were extinct. And the Skrae'l, their ancient enemies, had survived and were thriving. The leader absorbed this information with visible pain. Her species had hidden from an ice age, expecting to wake when things warmed up. Instead, they'd nearly died in their sleep. Her name meant something like Ashwalker in dragon language. You destroyed your escape, Ashwalker communicated, gesturing to the jury-rigged reactor. Your way off this world is gone. Why sacrifice for strangers? James looked at Ember, who chirped and rubbed against his leg. Because Ember isn't a stranger anymore. And once I knew you were all here, dying, I couldn't just leave. I'm not built that way. Ashwalker studied him for a long moment. Then she made a decision. The Skrae'l will come soon, she communicated. They tracked you here. They will attack in force, seeking to finish what they started long ago. I know, James said grimly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lead them to you. You did not lead them, Ashwalker corrected. You gave us the chance to fight. Without you, we would have died unknowing. This way, we can die with honor. Or, James said slowly, we could try not dying at all. Ashwalker tilted her head. Explain. James pulled out his datapad and began sketching positions. The Skrae'l are ambush hunters. They rely on overwhelming isolated prey. But they are not strategic thinkers. They attack in predictable waves. He looked up at the assembled dragons. You have flight, fire, and armor. I have strategic thinking and technology. The Skrae'l expect scared prey. What if we give them organized warriors instead? Ashwalker's eyes gleamed. Show us. The Skrae'l attacked at dawn. Hundreds of them poured from tunnels, swarming across the canyon. Their chittering echoed like nightmares as they rushed toward the cavern entrance expecting trapped prey. They found dragons waiting. Ashwalker led the pride into the sky, wings carrying them above the canyon. The Skrae'l shrieked in confusion. Their prey was supposed to be trapped, not flying. Then fire rained from the heavens. 50 dragons unleashed flames simultaneously. The canyon became an inferno. Ice turned to steam. Skrae'l burned, their armor providing no protection. The creatures scattered, trying to flee, but James had positioned the dragons based on Skrae'l movement patterns. There was no escape. From the cavern entrance, James coordinated the assault using his datapad. Wave 3 coming from the eastern tunnel. Red group, intercept. Silver group, collapse the northern ice shelf. Now. The dragons responded with precision. They'd been warriors once, millennia ago. Combined with James's tactical coordination, they were unstoppable. The battle lasted 30 minutes. When it ended, the Skrae'l were either dead or fled deep underground. The canyon was scorched clean. Ashwalker landed beside James, breathing heavily. Steam rose from her scales. The prey commands the predators, she communicated with amusement. The galaxy has become strange. It's always been strange, James said, watching Ember play with another young dragon. Most species just never figured out how to work together. You have proven something today, Ashwalker communicated seriously. Our old ways, isolated, superior, led to extinction. But your way, cooperation, created strength neither could achieve alone. She looked at the other dragons, then back to James. We will learn this new galaxy. And we will help you return to your people. You don't have to. The child refuses to leave your side, Ash Walker interrupted, glancing at Ember. Where you go, it follows. And where it goes, we follow. You saved us, James Carter. We will not forget. Over the following months, the dragons helped James repair his ship. They hauled materials, provided power through controlled flame, and flew scouting missions. What would have been impossible for one human became achievable with 50 dragons. When James's rescue beacon finally connected with a passing colony ship 8 months later, the colonists expected to find a dead pilot. Instead, they found something impossible. James Carter stood on a landing pad carved from ice, wearing armor decorated with dragon scales. Behind him, 50 dragons spread their wings. And perched on his shoulder, a half-grown dragon with midnight blue scales watched the approaching ship with curious gold eyes. The colony ship captain stared in disbelief. Control, are you seeing this? Confirmed. Captain, what are your orders? The captain watched James wave, watched the dragons hold formation. I think our orders are to listen. Because he clearly has one hell of a story. The story spread across human space within weeks. Politicians scrambled to establish relations. Military analysts studied the battle footage. Scientists went wild. But the real story, told in bars and around campfires, was simpler. A human crashed on an ice world. He lit a fire in the darkness. A dying dragon found that light and warmth. And from that simple act of compassion, 2 species found a path forward together. James was offered medals and promotions. He turned them all down. Instead, he became liaison to the dragons, helping them navigate the modern galaxy. Years later, when humans and dragons flew together on missions, when children of both species learned each other's languages, when fire and technology combined to protect colonies, people asked when the alliance truly began. Scholars cited treaties. Politicians referenced diplomatic sessions. Military leaders pointed to joint operations. But those who knew the truth understood it started simpler. A lost human lit a fire in a frozen forest. A baby dragon crawled into his lap. And from that warmth came hope for a better galaxy.